Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and I'm sitting in front of my movie wall, as you can see. And today I'm talking about The Shadow, starring Alec Baldwin. The Shadow is a 1994 movie directed by Russell Mulcahy, starring Alec Baldwin, John Lone, Penelope Ann Miller, Peter Boyle, Ian McKellen, Jonathan Winters, and Tim Curry. Been on kind of a comic booky kick lately. So I just rewatched Justice League the other day, and so I'm kind of looking at it and just going, I remember The Shadow. The Shadow was a character in the 1930s. And he was a radio personality, actually, he started out as. And what they would do is, back in the day, they would have these radio dramas where they would have people that would be sitting in a booth, okay, and everybody was kind of sitting in a semicircle around a bunch of microphones, and the people would be talking back and forth to each other. So they would be sitting there with a script in their hand, and they would be like reading to each other, okay, as they did things, and so they could kind of see facial expressions, and so it just helped with the intonation of things. And when they got done, the announcer would come back on, and he would be like, he would say, like, who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. And he would do this laugh. And so, sometime in the 1990s, somebody got the idea, hey, let's take this semi-unknown character that had some comic books, hasn't been around for 60 years, but let's turn it into a movie. So they went back, because originally he wasn't even he had a few characters here and there, but for the most part he wasn't really, like, he wasn't a Batman, he wasn't a Superman, he wasn't like that well known. So it's sort of like almost like Judge Dredd, kind of a cult following back then. And there were people that were still interested in The Shadow, because they had kind of discovered some of the things. Around the time this movie came out, they released a lot of the original pulp books and comic books that were released back in the 30s and 40s, with the Shadow. And the Shadow was always this guy, and you can kind of see the silhouette on the box. He had this kind of a fedora hat, and then he had a scarf around his face, so that all you saw was his nose and his eyes, and that was it. And I think really they nailed the look of the Shadow in this movie, because having, like, around the time that this came out, I actually went out and looked at some of the different comics and some of the different things that were released back in the 1930s, and damn was that just spot on everything. So the movie is very obscure. It was one of those that kind of came and went. A lot of people didn't really know what to make of it. They didn't know if it was a comic book movie. They didn't know if it was a different movie. They just weren't sure what it was. It was just sort of there. You know what I'm saying? Like, he wasn't part of DC, wasn't part of Marvel, wasn't part of Dark Horse, wasn't part of IDW. So nobody really knew who he was. It was just, and it was one of those things where at the time, we'd had a couple of Batman films. We hadn't really had many Marvel films that were very good or well done. Like, one off the top of my head would be the original Punisher with Dolph Lundgren. Another one would be the Fantastic Four movie that came out in 1991. The Captain America movie that came out in 1990. Very cheesily done. So here came this movie that it was based on a pulp character that nobody really knew much about. So it kind of flew under the radar, and I think it's become a cult classic because I think a lot of people, once they watched it a couple times, they're like, damn, that was actually a really good movie. Why didn't I know about this back then? Because it was just one of those just random characters that they just rebooted and they put out there. And so, yeah, and Alec Baldwin, so the other thing was, I think a lot of people drew a comparison between the character of Lamont Cranston, who is Alec Baldwin in this film, who Alec Baldwin plays in this film, and they draw a parallel between him and Batman because they're both rich, they both fight crime, they don't really have much in the terms of superpowers. The Shadow has the ability, a psychic ability, to cloud men's minds. Okay, leaving behind the only visible thing he cannot hide, his shadow. Okay, so that means if you shine a light on him, you shine a light over there, you see his shadow on the wall. And there's like a really cool scene where it's like you see him and he's like up against the wall and he's got his hands out like this and his cape is all billowing out and stuff. It's pretty cool. And it was early CGI too. This is like 1994, so yeah, CGI back then was very unreliable. I mean, it looked good for the time. It wasn't Double Dragon cheesy, but it was. And I say this, it holds up today. It holds up fairly well. There's a few scenes where you're kind of like, that's obviously CGI, and then there's other scenes where you're like, oh, that's not bad. Like it's kind of in between. It's a mixed bag of CGI because some of it was done very, very well. Like John Lone's character plays another character named Shiwan Khan, who's the last direct descendant of Genghis Khan, who has this knife called the purba, and the purba is it's like an animated knife, and it does a little thing, kind of things. It got little facial expressions and stuff, and they did really, really well with that. But then there were some parts where like you can see that it's obviously CGI. But they actually made a physical purba knife, and then they had one that was like CGI that would do different things and stuff like that. So and Frank Welker, the guy who did Megatron in the original Transformers animated cartoons in the 80s, he also did the voice characterizations of Abu in 1992 for Aladdin. So he does the voices for the Purba knife, and he does very, very well. Like, he is probably one of the best voice actors in a long time. He does a lot of voice characterizations for movies and different things like that. But anyway, so yeah, it's the Shadow is a very interesting film, and one of the things is like Penelope Ann Miller, who went on from this film to go do The Relic, or came from The Relic to do this film. I can't remember when The Relic came out. I think The Relic came out in 1998, so I think it was after this. She went and did The Relic. She didn't do a whole lot of movies in Hollywood, but she's a very good actress, and she plays sort of a psychic empath person. Like, she can pick up on things, like she can like sense some of Lamont's thoughts and different things like that. So she is, sort of the love interest in this film and some other things like that. So she does very, very well. Tim Curry's in this movie, and anything Tim Curry's in is awesome. Anybody who knows Tim Curry knows that any movie he's in, he just steals the show. Ian McKellen is in this movie, pre Lord of the Rings Ian McKellen, pre X-Men Ian McKellen. And he plays kind of an absent-minded professor, which just kind of shows his range because, if you watch his Magneto character, he's a different character than Gandalf, which is a different character than this. And so he really is a very good character actor in that he can play a myriad of different roles, and you can sit there and go, wow, like, I didn't realize that was Ian McKellen. Like, he's really, really good. And so, yeah, he does a very, very good job in this film. He's just great. And let me see, what else? Jonathan. Let me see. Jonathan Winters plays Commissioner Barth, who's sort of the uncle to Lamont Cranston. And he's sort of the Commissioner Gordon type character, but he's not like Commissioner Gordon's like, hey, I'll talk with Batman, like try to hide it, kind of, but he knows Batman, he's like, you know, doing stuff, and I think in one scene in Batman the Animated Series, like, he just backs up to an alley and he's like, thank you for that. And he's like, no problem. And then, like they have this little conversation, and then Batman takes off, and then he's just sort of like, well, I hope you can, or something like that. It's kind of like that, but not really, because Commissioner Barth does not know who Lamont Cranston really is, and so he's like, you know, shadow character, man. He's meddling in police affairs. I'm gonna put a task force on him, and so Lamont kind of goes back into the shadows, so that there's just like a line across his eyes, and he's just like, "You will not pay attention to these rumors of the shadow." So it's like he's literally controlling his uncle's mind. You're like, whoa. So there's definitely like a disconnect there. So yeah, there are some, and Lamont Cranston does live in a huge mansion, and so I think one of the biggest things that people see in this movie is the fact that, I mean, for 1994, and for being kind of a pseudo comic book slash pulp fiction character study of the 1930s, I mean, they did a really good job of putting in buildings and matte paintings and different things to make New York seem like it was 1930s. Even though most of it was filmed on a back lot, and they were using a lot of 1930s cars and various things like that, and they did a really good job. There is kind of a sidekick character played by Peter Boyle. He's Shrevnitz, the cab driver. He, saved, the Shadow saved his life, and that was one of the interesting things about this is when the Shadow saved your life, he would put a little ring on your finger, and and the ring was a jeweled ring with a little red jewel in it that would flash whenever he had a need for you, and then you would meet at a certain place. Um, you know, and they have this little like secret password system. Like the sun is shining, but the ice is slippery, kind of a thing. And so they have like these little secret codes and passwords. And he's got like a network of almost like bank teller things where you put the, I don't know if people know about this anymore, but when I was a kid, we had these little teller machines where you'd reach in and you pull out this little cylinder. It was a little plastic cylinder, and you either twist off the cap and then you put your stuff in, or you opened up this little flap and then you put your money in, and then you closed it, and then you stuck it back in, and then you pushed a button, and then a little door closed, and then like a little vacuum would just suck it right up a tube. Well, the Shadow had like a network of these all across the city. So there were miniatures where they made a whole bunch of these different like pipes that would fly around the city and stuff, and you would see there was like the sequence where you were like following this little letter as it went all around. And the Shadow had his own little sanctum. It wasn't a bat cave. It wasn't like a huge cave where he had all this technology and all these things, but he had a room that was called the Sanctum, and he would go and he would like hit this little little switch on the side of a fire escape thing, and it would come down, and it would do it would like open up this door, and then they actually had like a scene where he's closing the door behind him, and you can actually see like the pulleys and stuff working. I mean, it was like they really thought out like how would we do this in 1930s technology. So it was kind of like in the same vein as the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, that he set like how would Batman fight crime today? Like if he had unlimited money, he had unlimited resources, and a research and development department that could give him literally anything he needed, how would he fight crime today? And what would those villains, those supervillains in the comic books look like in the real world? And that's kind of how this movie is, The Shadow. It's literally this. It's like how would all of this technology work? And so like he had these like big sliding doors that would like come up, and then his sanctum was full of like crime fighting, like books on criminology and various things of the time, and he had like this little setup where he had a teeny tiny little TV screen that was only about that big, you know. But still, the fact of the matter is, he had that technology to be able to do that. So he could communicate face to face with this guy who would like, he was basically the messenger. He would handle all of the messages that came in. He was basically the bat computer before computers. Okay. And that's kind of like, it was such a really well done movie, and it was structured very very well also. So I would give this one a watch. It's obscure. It's done by Universal. I don't know if you can find it on Netflix. You can definitely find it on Amazon. Um, but I would get this movie and just give it a watch. It's a great little film from 1994 about a hero who's kind of unconventional. He's not really your typical comic book hero or anything like that. He's a different type of person. He's also very nonchalant about his thing. The other thing is, unlike Batman, he uses nickel plated 45s with ivory grips, and man, are those guns awesome looking. Because, like, there's some scenes where he's just like, just like blowing people away, and it was fun. I was like, wow, that was pretty good. Yeah, he has a couple of shootouts like that. And then, Alec Baldwin. There's another Alec Baldwin movie actually right up behind me right here. As you can see, Alec Baldwin was a very good actor back in the day. And he did this film, and then he did this film. And then after that, he kind of fell by the wayside and then ended up doing Final Fantasy The Spirits Within in the early 2000s. So, yeah, and he hasn't really done much since. So I really enjoy, this movie. I think it's criminally underrated. Another thing is that John Lone, the guy that plays the villain, he was a villain in Rush Hour 2. So if you've seen the movie Rush Hour 2, you know who John Lone is. He was Ricky Tam, the guy who was the partner of Jackie Chan's father, who you know killed him because he was gonna expose him. So yeah, give it a look, and I would give this movie about a 4 out of 5. It's very entertaining. It's wonderful to watch, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who is remotely interested in 1930s Pulp Fiction, because it was such a wonderfully written and well done motion picture. There are a few things that you kind of have to pay attention. This is not a turn your brain off at the door movie, so there are a few things you have to pay attention to. So I would recommend that you sit down and really watch the film the first time, and then after that, on successive tries, you can actually sit down and just watch it. The soundtrack is wonderful. They have a few songs in there that are pretty catchy, and so yeah, give her a look see, and that's it for now. I think. Let me see. I'm trying to think what's coming out pretty soon in the theater. Bohemian Rhapsody is out now. I'm going to be seeing it here pretty soon, so I'll end up doing a review of that. I've been looking forward to it. The guy that plays Pharaoh in the Night at the Museum movies is Freddie Mercury, and he nails that performance. And they even did the Live Aid concert from 1985. If you haven't seen that, go look it up on YouTube. It is wonderful. Because the ending of that, the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, is the Live Aid concert from 1985, which was the last concert that Freddie Mercury did before his death. And so that one, and then I'm trying to remember, there is another movie that I was looking for. Let me just pull out my IMDb app here and just take a quick look at what's coming up. In the meantime, I'll be looking at doing some DVD reviews as well. Yes, Overlord is coming out. The Girl in the Spider's Web. Those two I did want to see. Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald is coming out, so I'll probably end up doing that one too. Let me see, Creed 2. I might do a review of Creed, and then do Creed 2. And then let me see here. I don't think there's anything Mortal Engines, maybe. That one looks pretty good. Aquaman on December 21st. Bumblebee, maybe. Looks pretty good so far. Then we start jumping into January, which is really not much going on. Glass. Ooh, I do want to do Glass. For those of you that have seen Unbreakable and Split, Glass is the sequel to those two films. So Unbreakable happened where, for anybody who's familiar with Unbreakable, Unbreakable was about a guy who survives a train wreck, and this other guy who was born with bones that has some rare condition where his bones just break so easily. Like, he could fall down the steps or whatever and break a whole bunch of things. And Bruce Willis's character, if he touches someone, he can sense their future. And so in Split was James McAvoy, who had multiple personality disorder, and then one of those was called the Beast. And the Beast was like this guy who would just, kind of like Beast out of, kind of like an evil version of Beast out of X-Men. Just, just really crazy nutty dude. And Glass has, brings back Samuel L. Jackson, Bruce Willis, and James McAvoy. They're stuck in an asylum, and this woman's trying to say, there's really no such thing as superheroes. At least that's what the preview's starting with, and then it kind of goes from there, and it goes wild from there, man. Like, and so, yeah. So I watched Unbreakable, and I was like, wow, I really can't wait to see Glass. So yeah, that one's gonna be good. That one's coming out. Alita Battle Angel might be okay. Geez, there's really not much until we get to March 8th, which is going to be Captain Marvel, which I am really looking forward to. Because I want to see how they're going to do that for her, and then how they're going to bring her in. Yeah, and then there is Shazam coming out, which might be okay. Hellboy reboot. Excuse me. And then, of course, the Untitled Avengers sequel. John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. The Doom reboot. The live-action Aladdin, which I don't know. They got Will Smith to be the genie. I don't know about that. And then May 31st is Godzilla King of the Monsters. June 7th is X-Men Dark Phoenix. And then they're doing a sequel to Shaft. So yeah, we'll have to see. And then Spider-Man Far From Home, July 5th. They're doing a live-action, or, well, I don't know if it's live-action Lion King, but they're doing a Lion King. I'm assuming they're doing it like they did the Jungle Book. They're doing it CGI, so that people can talk and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm assuming they're doing. The New Mutants, August 2nd. It Chapter 2, maybe. I haven't even watched the first one. They're doing a Joker spin-off movie with Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker. I wonder if they're going to base it on the Killing Joke. On the backstory of the Killing Joke. It'll be interesting to see if they do. Oh, man. Not again. Yeah. So anyway, those are kind of some of the movies that I will be reviewing in the upcoming year. So just pick one that you're really excited about, and then around the time that movie comes out, come on back, check my page, like, subscribe, hit me up on Facebook at Russ's Movie Corner. Sorry that this one went a little bit longer than I thought, because I just kind of wanted to kind of talk about what movies I'm looking at reviewing down the road in theaters. Plus, I have my movie wall that I will be doing eventually. Like I said, I've just been so busy lately that this is kind of the first time that I've had to be able to sit down and actually do a couple of DVD reviews. And so, keep it locked here at Russ's Movie Corner for more DVD and movie reviews. And I will talk to you later.